Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, where you learn about what's happening in the greater East Bay. I am your host, Jared Asch. We've had lots of conversations about transportation innovation. Now we're going to look about how we could use our waterways here in the Bay Area, because we have this amazing bay right here that connects us. Instead of going over a bridge, can you just go over the water? Today, we are joined by Seamus Murphy, who is the executive director and CEO of the Water Emergency Management Agency, which oversees ferry operation here in the Bay Area. Seamus, thank you for joining us. Did I get your title right?
Just about executive director of the Water Emergency Transportation Authority, but it's just easier to say San Francisco Bay Ferry. That's the service that we operate and the brand that we operate it under. That's sort of the easiest way to introduce what we do.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and what the agency does, right? Other than move boats from one place to the next.
I like the way you teed it up with all of these waterways that are totally underutilized around the bay. What we do is try to utilize those in a better way. And we've been doing that for a little more than a decade. We're one of the newer transit agencies around the Bay Area, but we were the fastest growing transit system in the Bay Area before the pandemic, and we've been one of the fastest systems to recover. We have today 7 routes that we operate around the Bay, mostly bringing riders from the suburban areas, outlying areas of the Bay into San Francisco. And we have 16 vessels that we use to operate those routes. And we have 2 more vessels on the way. We've been expanding our service and our fleet pretty consistently since we started operation in 2011. And we've done that because demand for ferry service is pretty high. It's definitely one of the number one ways to travel around the Bay. It's one of those transit modes that once you try it, it's hard to use a different mode. It's easy to get people to make the shift once they use one of our services. That's what we're focused on, is trying to get more people to try it once, knowing that they're going to become repeat customers after they do that.
Tell us a little bit about yourself as well and your background, and how long
Sure.
you've been there since its founding now?
No, I've been here for a little more than 3 years. I spent about a decade at the Caltrain commuter rail system, helping to raise the money and develop the plan to electrify that service. That's a diesel commuter rail service that has been around for more than 100 years and had some plans to electrify for actually a couple decades before we been able to make it happen. $2.5 billion project that we successfully were able to implement. And later this fall, they'll turn the switch on and start operating electric trains for the first time. It's going to be a huge benefit for folks on the peninsula, more frequency, shorter travel times, increased ridership, which that system definitely needs coming out of the pandemic. And I moved over to the ferry system to sort of do the same thing. We have some of the same regulatory requirements that are state air quality related requirements that a commuter rail system has, that our bus agencies have to decarbonize and reduce emission. And ferry service is today 100% diesel. We're the cleanest ferry system in the country, but we know that we can do a lot better. They're doing things better overseas and around the world, where they've successfully decarbonized a good chunk of ferry service, especially in the Scandinavian countries. And we've learned a lot from them over the last few years, and we're planning to replicate a lot of what they're doing here in the Bay Area.
Let's follow that path for a minute. How do you get to zero emissions in your operations?
There's a few ways to do it. There's first ways to reduce emissions, even with a diesel fleet. And that's something that San Francisco Bay Ferry has been a leader on nationally. We have developed vessels with hull designs that are very efficient, catamaran style hull designs that use less energy and therefore less fuel. Our newest vessels, which we have the first 2 that have been delivered over the past couple of years. They're 40% more fuel efficient than vessels that were just built 6 years ago. You can do a lot just with the evolution of hull design and the use of renewable diesel, and 100% of our system uses renewable diesel as a fuel source. But what we ultimately need to do is go to zero emission. And there are some different ways to do that. There are alternative fuels like hydrogen that will allow you to operate with zero emissions. There's battery electric technology that will allow you to operate with zero emissions. It depends on what the use case is. One thing that we did is we made a decision that we didn't want to go down that road, or one road or another, until we had seen it operate successfully somewhere else in the world. Hydrogen technology is still pretty new in the maritime space. There's only one hydrogen passenger-only fast ferry that exists in the world. We actually happen to be leasing it, and we're going to start operating it as a demonstration project for 6 months on the San Francisco waterfront starting in June. And we have a lot of hope that hydrogen can be a technology that advances and evolves so that it will be usable in the maritime space in a way that would work for our system, especially for some of our longer distance routes. But we've seen battery electric proven out. We have enough experience around the world with battery electric technology in the ferry space that we know it works. We know it can be done. As soon as we saw, as an agency, the Norwegians operate a vessel called the Medstrom, which goes 26 knots, sort of in the sweet spot for our Central Bay routes between Oakland and Alameda and San Francisco. It can maintain that speed for an hour before it needs to be recharged. And that's exactly what we need. We needed to see vessels that would operate at higher speeds, even though batteries are really heavy. And to do that, we needed battery technology to evolve to become more energy dense and lighter so that it wouldn't be a drag on vessel speed. We also needed the recharge time to improve and that rapid charging technology to improve. And we've seen it happen now, and it's been put into practice. There are vessels operating around the world that are battery electric, and they're operating really successfully with reduced costs for maintenance. Anybody who owns an electric car knows that you're not maintaining. It requires much less maintenance than a fuel-based engine. And so we're going to expect to see some of those same benefits here. We immediately started raising money for our conversion to battery electric technology when we saw that it was proven out around the world. And over the last 2 years, we've raised $125 million to build our first 5 electric vessels. 3 of them will be smaller, 150 passenger vessels that will operate on some of our shortest routes, some of the new routes in the Bay Area, connecting Treasure Island with San Francisco, for example, connecting the Mission Bay neighborhood with the ferry building so that there's a last mile solution to a neighborhood that's growing very quickly in San Francisco and doesn't have a lot of transit connections. 3 of those vessels will be built over the next year and a half, and 2 400 passenger vessels will be built after that. And those will be the first battery electric vessels in our fleet. About half of the funding we've raised is for the vessels themselves. The other half is for the charging infrastructure. It's a real challenge when you talk about needing to bring, in our case, 50 megawatts of new power to the waterfront. Turns out that's quite a bit, and it's pretty to update the grid and extend the grid so that we can charge banks of batteries that will be on our floats and will trickle charge during the night when electricity is pretty cheap compared to daytime. And then they'll be charged and be able to fully support the operation of our electric vessels during the day. Our vessels will rapid charge during, for 5 or 10 minutes during dwell time when passengers are loading and unloading, and be able to make the full completion of their service day. And after that, they'll recharge again overnight and rinse and repeat. We're excited about it. We'll be the first system in the country to operate zero emission ferries as a part of a network like this. I think our ferries will be the best in the world probably for only 4 or 5 months until somebody figures out a way to evolve the technology even further, and that's okay. That's the way this stuff is supposed to work.
One other question on the goal of zero emissions. if you're going to put 50 megawatts of power, that's roughly 10 megawatts per, vehicle based on the 5. I know some are bigger than others. That's a lot of power. How do you get the mix of clean power? Is that all going to be microgrid based? Are you pumping it in with PG&E? How's all that work?
The good news is we don't need 50 megawatts just to support those 5 vessels. The 50 megawatts is a one-time investment in the infrastructure, including the rapid charging infrastructure on our floats. And that infrastructure is going to support the operation of maybe 20 vessels over. We're going to grow, we're going to expand, we're going to increase the size of our fleet, we're going to operate to new places around the bay. And we want to do that with zero emission vessels. We've bought our last diesel vessel. We have 2 under construction right now. And once they're delivered, everything that we build after that will be zero emission. We know from our analysis, 50 megawatts is plenty to be able to support that expansion. The first 5 vessels actually can run with some existing shore power even while those upgrades are being made. And the 50 megawatts is not all in one place. There's about 20 or 25 in downtown San Francisco where we have the biggest need. And then the rest is spread out at terminals throughout our network in Alameda, where we have 3 terminals, Oakland, Richmond, Berkeley. When we bring that terminal online, it's an expansion project that we're pursuing. And the mix of renewable electricity that's coming from the grid really depends on the utility. In San Francisco's case, 100% of the commercial energy electricity is produced from renewable sources. Other utilities have different mixes. Ultimately, everybody is shifting towards 100% renewable sources of electricity, and we're confident that that can be done and that our system can be truly zero emission, even when you account for the production of the energy that we're using.
Talk about the riderships and route planning. First part of that is how does the experience, the speed, the time from point A to point B compare to BART, bus, and the convenience of it all?
Yeah, it's a great question. We know we have to be competitive. Traveling on the ferry is a pretty good way to travel, and we have a 99% customer satisfaction rating for a public transit system. It's the best in the country, and we want to keep it that way. Views will do a lot, concessions and other amenities that are unique to our system will do a lot to make it a great experience for the rider. But when you run a transit service, nothing makes up for frequency and travel time. You need to be able to have those 2 things be competitive with other options. We count as our competition driving alone, carpooling, all of those options are available to people. We think they ought to be choosing a ferry. We want to give them a reason to do that. Increasing frequency of our service is something that we have aspirations to do. We have aspirations to improve travel time, and we have aspirations to go to more places so that we can be a convenient travel mode of choice for more riders. Ultimately, all of those plans are captured in something that our board just approved a couple of weeks ago. We have a 2050 service vision that's part of a larger business planning process. And that service vision lays out what the ferry system will look like a couple decades from now. And the vision that we have is pretty expansive. Number one, all of the routes that we're operating today are going to be better. They're going to be more frequent. They're going to be operated with zero emission service, and the travel times should be improved as technology improves. The vessels that the newest vessels that we have in our fleet have the ability to operate at faster speeds than the current vessels running service to Vallejo, our longest distance route, for example. We have opportunity to improve the travel time there. There are some vessel technologies that we're looking at demonstrating in the future that can operate at higher speeds with no wake. And there's some areas of our service that are limited in terms of speed because of the wake, the areas that require no wake, like the Napa River area of Vallejo. And a full oil vessel doesn't produce any weight when it's going 40 knots. So that's something that we're excited about as an opportunity to reduce travel time. Ultimately, frequency is, the number one thing that riders want to see out of our transit system. The sweet spot is every 15 minutes. If you know you don't need to check a schedule and you can just show up and there's going to be a trip that's leaving from a station and get you where you want to go, that's where you see exponential increases in ridership demand. And that's ultimately where we would like to be. We're going to start looking at frequencies in that neighborhood with the new waterfront service in San Francisco that connects the fastest growing neighborhood in Mission Bay with the next fastest growing neighborhood in Treasure Island and the Ferry building. We're pretty excited about the ridership demand potential there. Those are neighborhoods that are on the waterfront that are not easily accessible by car or by other transit modes. And we can make those trips in, 7 to 10 minutes. We think that there's going to be a significant demand there as neighborhoods are built out.
As you expand the service in that 10-year plan, can you get further around the Bay Area? Like, can you get into Pittsburgh, Antioch, Oakley, which are connected through the Student Bay? Can you get up to Rio Vista on the Sacramento River or up to Napa through the inlets there? Or is there that limit you were sort of talking about with no wakes or areas? 'Cause get up the Sacramento River and bring people in, that's changing a lot, or get over to the East County of Contra Costa.
There are some challenges for sure. Just like we know we're seeing all of the fastest growing neighborhood in the Bay Area, a lot of them happen on the waterfront in places like Mare Island and Alameda. We're at the Alameda Point Naval Station or Treasure Island or Mission Bay. Those are all areas that are tailor-made for water transit service. We can go there. Not a lot of other transit modes can go there and operate as effectively or as efficiently as we can. But there's some other areas that are right for other transit services where water transit just may not work because of challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges is dredging. Even though there might be waterways, a lot of them in the Bay are really, really shallow. And dredging is, number one, really expensive. Number two, not an environmentally friendly exercise in a lot of cases. So we definitely share the environmental concerns of folks who are worried about over dredging in the Bay Area. That's one reason why we have a project to extend our terminal at the city of Vallejo out further into the Napa River to reduce the amount of dredging that needs to be done in that area, maybe even eliminate it, prevent us from needing to shut down service when we have extreme low tides or when dredging needs to happen. It's going to be a huge improvement for the customers and the riders in Vallejo, but also a major environmental benefit and a huge cost benefit for us because dredging is getting more and more expensive every year, and we seem to need to do it more frequently than we used to. So that's one challenge that we have. It's not an insurmountable challenge. It's something that there are still some expansion opportunities that we know are viable. I know a lot of your audience is from Contra Costa County. And so in the Carquinez Strait, the cities in Pittsburgh, Martinez, Hercules did a study recently to assess the viability of water transit service expansion into those areas. And we didn't learn anything surprising there. We learned that it would be expensive to build the infrastructure needed. We learned that there are some dredging challenge that we would need to manage. And we learned that the operating costs associated with operating that service are significant. But that's okay. We need to quantify those things so that we can understand what the opportunities are. And now that we understand a little bit more about it, what we're interested in doing is not continuing to study the issue, but actually demonstrating a service. As an outcome of that feasibility study, we're looking forward to piloting a service to one of those cities and running maybe some new technology with vessels that we would lease or our existing vessels still to be determined, and connecting those cities, providing a new water transit connection for one of those cities into San Francisco or maybe into some of our other areas that we serve to measure the ridership demand, see if the route has potential to attract more riders or attract riders, period, and see if it can be successful. If it is, those kind of demonstration projects, those pilot programs are services that we want to offer annually, things that we want to test out and maybe make a part of our permanent network if they are successful, if they achieve the metrics and the goals that we would set out at the.
There'd be a lot of economic development bringing in more people through that path in East Contra Costa County for equity, for traffic solutions, if you can get in there. But I realize, like you said, right, if you have to dredge, it becomes a lot more costly, a lot of environmental concern. But the fact that you're looking at it and trying to develop a plan gives hope, right? It has to be part of a long-term solution in a master plan for the region's transit.
Yeah, and not even just developing a plan. We actually want to operate a service and demonstrate it for a period of time as part of a pilot project. And that's something we're doing with the hydrogen vessel, running it for 6 months, testing the technology, getting our crews familiar with operating the technology, learning about the supply of hydrogen and the challenges associated with that. Pretty expensive. The price is variable. It's hard to get. There's no green hydrogen available right now in California. Those are all things we're going to learn. We're going to a lot of the same types of things. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities when we operate a new service to a city in the Carquinez area?
How do you study the potential demand for the service?
There's a million ways to study it, right? You can do the demand analysis. You can use the cell phone data to measure where people are traveling from and origin and destination data. That stuff is all helpful, but I'm a firm believer that you don't really know until you put it in place. So, if we can run a service and it's attractive and those vessels are full, that's a pretty good sign that the demand is there and it's something that's going to grow and be sustainable over time. And we certainly need it to be, because even though fare box recovery is not as important as it used to be to Bay Area transit systems, it shouldn't be as important as we used to think it was before the pandemic. It still is something that we need to think about, because there's only so much subsidy available for public transit in the Bay Area, and we need to make sure that we have a service cost effective at the end of the day. Ferries were, sort of had a bad rap from a cost effectiveness standpoint at one point in time. We've done a lot to improve the efficiency, and today the ferry system is the sixth most efficient service from a cost standpoint when you look at the cost per passenger mile, which is the most important metric to look at when you're measuring efficiency.
If you build it, they will come. I think that makes sense. It's hard for people to envision something that's not there and how it could be a benefit to them. I like that you could expand it into other areas. Talk about your recovery post-COVID. What do your numbers look like? How does it compare to other transit agencies?
We're hitting our high season right now. We're one of those transit systems that has a high season during the summer, and things taper off a little bit in the winter. They're tapering off less than they used to, which is a good thing for us. But we've been one of those agencies that's rebounded really quickly and robustly. We're hitting weeks now, May, that are 100% of pre-COVID levels. We're the fastest growing system in the transit system in the Bay Area in terms of ridership before the pandemic. We're exceeding our 2018 levels regularly, and 2019 levels now that we're hitting the peak season. So, it's good, but costs have gone up. A common refrain in the transit world is that we don't just need to get back to pre-pandemic levels. We need to really dramatically exceed pre-pandemic ridership levels if we're going to really recover in a way that keeps us out of that transit doom spiral that people talk about, where we don't have as many riders and need to cut service, and then have even less riders and need to cut more service, and pretty much eventually you're cutting down to nothing. We don't have that issue, thankfully, at San Francisco Bay Ferry. Our ridership numbers are good. We credit that to the way we handled the recovery from the pandemic. We used the federal COVID relief funding that was provided nationwide to transit agencies to bring back our service really early. We were the first Bay Area system to fully restore our service, and we did it in a different way. We didn't just bring back the same routes, the same frequencies, the same trips that we had before the pandemic. We recognized that the system needed to operate in a different way to cater to what was an evolving travel market in the Bay Area. Number one, we reduced fares. We recognized that you have a supply and demand problem. We need to really increase the demand and make our system as accessible as possible, make it as convenient as possible, as affordable as possible for as many riders as we can. And before the pandemic, people paid a premium. Riders paid a premium to ride the ferry. You could take BART or an express bus for a lower fare. We just didn't think that that was the right approach. We like the idea of making our fares consistent and aligning them with other transit modes operating in the same corridor so that riders can just choose the system that works best for them without needing to worry about cost. And we saw a lot of riders decide to choose the ferry instead of other services, and certainly instead of driving when we brought our service back. We saw ridership double overnight when we brought it back in 2021. It's grown consistently over that time. Our weekend ridership was immediately growing rapidly and recovered to 100% of pre-pandemic levels really quickly. That's because people just were back to doing what they were doing on the weekend. The weekday ridership, as you would expect, has been slower because they're not back, all of them, to doing what they used to do during the week. It's still been increasing. Commute ridership has been increasing as more and more people go back to work. We've been beating the office occupancy rates in San Francisco steadily and consistently, even though the office occupancy rates have been fairly flat and maybe just increasing slightly. Our ferry ridership has been increasing at a higher rate. So those are our goals. We look at our peers. BART and Caltrain are probably the peers that our ridership market most closely corresponds to. And those systems are certainly struggling in terms of ridership, and we know why. It's a big challenge, and they have major challenges to deal with. Caltrain has an electrification project that hasn't allowed them to restore consistent service over time. BART has some public safety issues that they've done a tremendous job of addressing. We'd like to continue to be the number one regional transit system in terms of ridership recovery. Ultimately, we need to just get as many people on the transit period as we can. And we're working as a collective group of operators throughout the Bay Area to do.
You failed to mention one key amenity that I believe you guys have. You guys serve coffee in the morning on the ferries, right? And that's profitable as well.
Well, we serve free coffee in the mornings now on many of our ferries. We're constantly looking at ways to improve the rider experience. It sounds like a small thing, but when I started working at the agency 3 years ago, I looked at our customer satisfaction surveys, and they were great. We had 75% approval and a really high level of customer satisfaction. A huge number of the people that were dissatisfied, it was because of the quality of concessions that we were offering on board. We made some immediate changes to that, just upgraded the concessions. We partnered with some craft beer makers in the Bay Area to produce ferry themed beers to celebrate the return of service. We're doing round 2 of Brews with Views promotion, and that's going to start in June. We have Original Pattern in Almanac right next to our Seaplane Lagoon Ferry Terminal in Alameda. They've produced a couple of ferry-themed beers we're going to feature on the system throughout the summer. Hopefully people can ride the system and take advantage of it.
And are the beers free too, or just the coffee?
The beers are not free. Just,
but it's interesting when you talk about your customer satisfaction survey that people wanted the improvement in concessions, considering or Caltrain doesn't even offer that. Really something that makes the agency stand out. And it's okay if you only have 99%. If you had 100% satisfaction, I wouldn't believe you, because somebody always complains, right?
we don't expect we're going to hold that level. It's really hard to hold that level, but so far so good. One of the reasons why we didn't look at operating slower vessels when we convert to electric service, or less frequent vessels when we convert, is that we want to keep those customer satisfaction numbers high. We love going zero emission in the Bay Area. We're all big fans of that. A lot of people choose to ride public transit because of the greenhouse gas benefits that it offers. But as soon as you tell people their trip's going to take longer, or there's going to be less frequent service, you're going to lose a lot of riders no matter what. Our goal is to maintain that customer satisfaction rating, maintain the quality of our service, while at the same time reducing emissions.
Let's talk about the infrastructure and asset your organization manages outside of the city. How could you best utilize that for customer satisfaction and to improve the areas? I believe in Vallejo, you guys have lots of parking facilities. I believe in some other areas like Richmond too. Can you talk a little bit about some of that stuff?
We don't own any of the parking facilities. Those are owned and managed by the cities that we serve, but we have great relationships with them and decisions about bicycle parking capacity or how much to charge for parking in various places. Those are, made in coordination with us. One thing that we know we can work collaboratively with cities and with other transit agencies that connect to our system to improve is just the first and last mile options. Most people don't live right next to the ferry. More and more people do because we're serving some of these growing waterfront communities, and that's great. The best first and last mile solution is just a walk from your front door to a ferry terminal. But most people need to take a first last mile mode that's different. We've been expanding options there. We have a TNC program that Solano County Transportation Authority offers that provides a discounted Uber or Lyft ride for riders that are connecting to the ferry terminal. We want more and more people to know about that and take advantage of it. And it is widely utilized, and it's a great amenity for Solano County residents. We did a similar TNC discount for riders when we had to close down our Main Street terminal in Alameda. We offered free rides for riders that used to use that station that would need to use the Oakland station instead for a period of time. And we didn't lose any riders during the time that we were at our rehab work at Main Street. I think largely because we made that option available to people. We've seen bike access to the ferry dramatically improve. I think part of that is because of the work that cities are doing to improve bicycle infrastructure throughout their communities, and especially to destinations like ferry terminals. And then part of it is just the proliferation of electric bikes. E-bikes are increasing the catchment area for our riders really dramatically. It used to be that you needed to be a mile away or less to consider a bike commute. That's being expanded really significantly because of the proliferation of e-bikes. A lot of our bicycle space on board is filling up pretty fast. We're looking at ways to expand that so that we can continue to encourage people to use bikes to access the ferry terminal. Transit connections are really important. There's not enough of them. We think that there's opportunities for better coordination between us and the bus agencies and the communities that we serve, shuttles to employers and campuses. That's something that we need to do more of. We're actively pursuing some of those opportunities, and we have a terminal access policy that's in development now. It'll be a part of our larger 2050 business plan, and it'll give us a lot of work to do over the next 20 years to make all of those improvements happen.
Let's look forward. I was going to say 10, but maybe it's 20. And the agency is going through this growth phase. You talked a little bit about a growth plan, new destinations. You talked a lot about zero emission vehicles. Where would you and the board look, whether it's 10 years out or 20 years out, and say, wow, we were successful at.
We have three themes with our service vision. It's enhance existing service, expand service to new areas, and electrify our service. Starting with the last one, it's absolutely important that we are successful in adopting zero emission battery electric technology on our system, on the routes that we currently serve, and so on some of our expansion routes, and ultimately all of our routes in the future. That number one, in order for us to say, look, we did a good job implementing this vision, we need to achieve that. We need to make that happen. Two, we need to upgrade the service on the routes that we currently operate. We talked about frequency and how important it is. I promise you, if we are operating every 15-minute service on some of our Transbay routes, we're going to see ridership really, really grow. And we need to have the equipment to be able to do that. We need to have the funding to be able to do that. Even though we're the sixth most efficient transit service in terms of cost effectiveness of the 27 that operate around the Bay Area, We can always do a better job at utilizing those resources, and there needs to be more resources made available. There's some folks looking at how to better subsidize transit around the Bay Area, and for us to succeed in enhancing service on those existing routes, more resources, especially on the operating side, need to be made available. And third, we need to go to more places. We have some immediate opportunities, like I mentioned, in Treasure Island and Mission Bay, that we're going to roll out in the near term. We have some next phase of expansion that will extend service to Berkeley and Redwood City. Those are green lines on the map for our service vision. We know that they can be done. We know that the ridership demand is there. We know those routes will be successful. We have very ambitious community partners who are committed and dedicated to doing what needs to be done to make those services happen. And then we have some yellow lines. And I think one thing that we need to do to make that vision successful, if it's going to be successful, some of those yellow lines need to turn green. Lines like the routes to some of our cities in the Carquinez Strait. New lines on the map that don't necessarily connect some of the outlying areas in San Francisco or in the Bay Area to San Francisco. The system today looks like a hub and spoke. We've got the hub in San Francisco and then a bunch of spokes going out to suburban areas or outlying areas that are urban that we serve, and giving people a water transit option to use in those areas. It's important to get to San Francisco, but maybe a hub and spoke is not what we need to look like in the future. Maybe it's more of a spiderweb approach where you have connections to Marin and the East Bay, or a connection between Vallejo and Oakland. Those are pretty hard commutes to make in a vehicle or even on other transit modes. And if we can present an option that's more compelling, that's more convenient, that's affordable, and it offers the world-class amenities and service that we operate on other routes, I think that we'll be successful. So hopefully some of those yellow lines will turn green eventually over the next couple decades.
Great vision for success. Anything else you want to share before we head out?
Well, let me make a little pitch for public transit generally in the Bay Area. I think everybody knows no region has been hit harder by the pandemic and work from home trend than the Bay Area has. And our transit systems happened to be some of the most successful before the pandemic. We had these super high fare box recovery ratios. And that means that we had systems like San Francisco Bay Ferry, Caltrain, and BART that had really, really good, where a huge percentage of our operating costs were recovered through fare. And nobody else had that. Other regions around the world, other regions around the country didn't have anywhere close to the 60 to 75% fare box recovery ratios that we had. But that success made us really vulnerable to ridership losses and the impact that those ridership losses would have on our ability to maintain service for the essential workers, for folks that need it, for people that don't have the choice to use a car or the choice to work from home. Now that it's still slowly coming back, we need to look like the rest of the country and the rest of the world in terms of how we subsidize transit. The reason why those other regions, those other cities, those other parts around the world could maintain their systems is because they valued it and they paid for it. They subsidized their transit systems in a much more significant way than we do in the Bay Area. And there's some efforts now just to have the Bay Area catch up with the rest of the country, catch up with the rest of the world in terms of how we pay for this vital resource that we provide. I hope that your listeners will give that some thought when some of those opportunities come up, and support efforts to provide transit with the subsidy that we need to be able to maintain service, to be able to get cars off the road, to be able to transition our services to zero emission and improve air quality, improve the economy, and create jobs for the region. It's really important that we do that.
I appreciate it. Seamus Murphy from SF Bay Ferry. Thank you for joining us on the Capstone Conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Wait, don't leave yet. Hit subscribe. Make sure you get the weekly updates. We have a new episode every Wednesday for stuff happening in the East Bay. In the meantime, Follow me on LinkedIn, Jared Asch, or check out our firm where we have a weekly newsletter and blog at Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us today on the Capstone Conversation.